Hi everyone, Retro Tech Dad here, and no fancy intro this time around. We're going with a different style so that we can take an early look at the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, which came in the other day, and I've been working all day on trying to put something together for everybody. This is not going to be in-depth by any means, and I will have my usual long-form video after I return from my trip to CES with the Retro Handhelds team, Russ from Retro Gamecore, and Joey from Joey's Retro Handhelds. They will all have great content coming out with the Pocket 4, and in case you missed it, I recommend checking out the live stream that we did the other night as well, which I will have linked down below in the description. The Retroid team was kind enough to send me the unit that you see in hand here, which is the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro in black. They will be releasing two different versions, the standard 4, which comes with the Dimensity D900, which I have on order, and the one here, which is the Pro model with the Dimensity D1100. This is the first time we are seeing this specific chipset in a handheld, but it is quite similar to the D1200, which I have pretty good familiarity with, covering it previously on the channel, including a pretty lengthy PS2 showcase from way back with the GPD XP+. Now, as I mentioned, the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro is powered by the Dimensity D1100, which features 4 Cortex A78 cores clocked at 2.6 GHz and 4 Cortex A55 cores clocked at 2 GHz. For the GPU, we have the Mali G77 MC9 clocked at 836 MHz. The Pro model includes 8GB of LPDDR4X RAM and 128GB of internal UFS 3.1 storage. It does ship with Android 13 out of the box. The Retroid Pocket 4 and 4 Pro are both available for pre-order directly from the Retroid website, which I will have linked down below. The Pocket 4 Pro is going to be available for $199 US. According to their website, the Pocket 4 Pro will start shipping on January 15th. Retroid's website is also a great place to get the official grip, case, as well as replacement parts for the Pocket 4. Now, at first glance, the 4 Pro looks very similar to its predecessor, the 3 Plus. But as we start to pay attention to the details, there's a lot that's been changed here, and the 4 Pro is more than just a bump in power. First things first, let's take a look at the shoulder area where we now have analog triggers. This was something that I always wished the 3 Plus included, and having these triggers will be great for Gamecube, and especially for game streaming, which the 4 Pro will be quite solid for with the built-in Wi-Fi 6. Looking a bit closer here, and Retroid has added a nice texture to both the shoulder button and trigger, and it's definitely a small detail that I appreciate. The movement here is very smooth and has solid resistance, but not overly difficult to press down on. The range of the trigger is spot on, and even comparing it to Retroid's own 2S, this feels a bit better to me. I also like that the trigger here is slightly wider, and not only that, but slightly taller as well compared to the 3 Plus. The 4 Pro definitely accommodates your finger better when holding the handheld. Now, a subtle change is the removal of the Retroid branding on the bezel of the 3 Plus. Instead, with the 4 and 4 Pro, Retroid has moved their branding to the back of the unit. I like this more subtle approach to their branding, and it does add just a bit of a refined look to their unit overall. I'll also comment on the plastic itself, which was the first thing I immediately noticed holding it in hand. In the past, the solid colors had a different feeling plastic when compared to the transparent models, such as the purple 3 Plus I have here. However, the black 4 Pro I have in hand here actually feels very much like my purple 3 Plus, and there's a very nice, subtle texture to the plastic all around. Now, it's definitely subtle, but also noticeable, and I have to say it's a solid change. I was worried that the black unit here would be a fingerprint magnet, but it is holding up quite well to me handling the unit. I'm intentionally pressing and rubbing my fingers into the plastic, and while not completely resistant, it is still holding up quite well. In regular handling while gaming, this shouldn't be much of an issue, and I've definitely used black handhelds that were far worse than this. Moving to the front of the unit, and a much more noticeable change are the new analog sticks that are being used here. These are the same ones that we have seen on the Retroid Pocket 2S, and it's exactly what I was hoping Retroid would use after trying them out the first time. Gone are the small Switch-style sticks that the 3 Plus used. Instead, we have these Hall effect sticks that, while not full-size analog sticks, have movement that is similar to a traditional controller like the Xbox Series or PS5. The range of movement here is much improved over the 3 Plus sticks, and I've been a fan of these since their introduction on the Pocket 2S and of course on the AYN Odin 2. These sticks do sit slightly more above the face of the 4 Pro compared to the 3 Plus sticks. However, I think this is a worthwhile trade-off for improved analog sticks. Again, you can really see the difference in movement here between the two. I also like that the new sticks have a concave cap versus the convex cap on the 3 Plus, which gives your thumbs a better place to rest and a little bit more grip on the analog stick. Now I think most will notice that the 4 Pro has gained some new buttons on the front of the unit. This is another welcome change that I think will make many happy, as the start and select have now been moved from its awkward position on the top to the front of the device on the right side. We also have dedicated Android buttons for home and going back, which are located on the left side. Not only that, but the volume control has been moved from the left side to the top of the 4 Pro, where the start and select used to reside on the 3 Plus. The power button has been placed next to the volume control on the top right instead of its old position on the top left. I'll admit I have hit the power button many times in my short time using the 4 Pro because I'm still used to the start and select being up top. Now this is just a me problem and I'm still getting used to things here. I will say that I wish the power button was a little bit more separated from the volume control, as I can definitely see some accidental presses happening. And speaking of buttons, the face buttons here are in fact larger than what we had on the 3 Plus. It's another subtle difference, but measuring the 4 Pro's face buttons, they are just shy of 7mm and are essentially identical to the ones on the 2S. We're gaining about half a millimeter over the 3 Plus face buttons. Now I will be covering this in more detail in my in-depth video during my usual teardown segment, so we can verify a few more things, such as the ability to swap the layout style from the Nintendo setup here to the Xbox setup. Finally, a pretty significant change from the 3 Plus is the inclusion of active cooling here, which will allow us to push the D1100 to its full potential and really make use of the extra power available here. Retroid has included various performance profiles as well as fan options. I do wish that the fan settings were a bit more flexible in high performance mode, as in my early testing, I have found that the 4 Pro is staying well within normal temperature ranges. The reason I say this is that the fan on its sport mode setting is quite audible. The smart mode option is slightly better, but I really do think that given the temperatures I've seen, the high performance mode could possibly get away with a lower setting. I'm hoping that this is something that Retroid will consider expanding on in the future to allow us more flexibility with the options. Overall, I have to say that a lot of these changes and refinements were needed and are meaningful. I'm glad to see that Retroid is continuing to iterate and improve on their prior designs. So with all of that, let's quickly size up the 4 Pro to some other handhelds. With this overhead shot of the Odin 2, 4 Pro, 3 Plus, and 2S, we can see that the 4 Pro and 3S essentially are the same size in terms of width. It's also a decent amount smaller than the Odin 2. One thing I've noticed come up is the thickness of the 4 Pro, which I couldn't believe how thin it is given that we have active cooling here. It's actually not much more than the 3 Plus, and I'm pretty impressed that the 4 Pro still maintains a relatively slim profile. Now the 4 Pro measures in at just under 16mm, whereas the 3 Plus is just slightly over 14mm. So we're talking about roughly a 2mm change in thickness from the 3 Plus to the 4 Pro, which again does have active cooling. I'm really excited to delve into the handheld and do my usual teardown to see just how they pulled some of this off. Now let me grab the 2S, and this one to my eye looked like it was very close to the 4 Pro's thickness. So measuring it up here, and the 2S is just under 16mm as well, so the 2S and the 4 Pro share a very similar profile in terms of thickness. Finally, for fun, let's check out the thickness of the Odin 2, which measures in at under 17mm and so is slightly thicker than the 4 Pro. Before we move on to the good stuff, which is of course emulation, I do want to show quickly just the performance improvements coming from the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus to the 4 Pro. This is by no means in-depth, and I will definitely be really diving into this much more for my in-depth video. The tests here were conducted using the extreme setting on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus and the high performance mode with Sport Band setting on the Pocket 4 Pro. So quickly, let's take a look at the Geekbench 6 numbers for the Pocket 4, which comes in at 1118 for the single core score and 3514 for the multi-core score, compared to the 3 Plus, which came in at 468 for its single core score and 1493 for its multi-core score. This represents almost a 139% increase in performance on the single core score and about 135% increase for the multi-core score. Now on the GPU side, let's check out the Wildlife Extreme Test in 3D Mark, and the RP4 Pro scored a 1268, whereas the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus scored only 185, and so this is a definite boost in performance on the GPU side as well. we're looking at nearly 7 times the performance increase coming from the T618 in the Pocket 3 Plus to the 4 Pro here, and that is absolutely insane to me. It's very clear that the Retroid Pocket 4 presents a tremendous price to performance value. Alright, enough of the synthetic numbers, it's time to check out some emulation on the Pocket 4 Pro, and really, that's why we're all here. We're gonna start off with one of my absolute favorite consoles, a platform that is no stranger to my channel, and one that I always love to talk about. PlayStation 2 emulation on the Pocket 4 Pro in my early testing has been very impressive. As I mentioned before, I had some idea of what to expect given my experience with the D1200. However, the D1100 looks to be up to the task here. Personally, I always considered PS2 and even Gamecube and Wii emulation to be very much a bonus on a device like the 3 Plus. And now with the 4 Pro, we are almost there. We still have some games that prove to be challenging, but with some tweaking or clever usage of PAL or NTSC versions, we are getting really close here. Games like Burnout Revenge, which has been on screen and is using the pre-installed version of Ether SX2 that ships with the Pocket 4 Pro. I've got the NTSC version here on Vulkan, and at 1.7 times the native resolution, we are staying nice and locked to 60 frames per second here. Now moving on to a viewer request, here we have Need for Speed Most Wanted, and the Need for Speed games are actually quite demanding on both PS2 and Gamecube. I decided to go with the PAL version here using Vulkan again, and at 2 times the native resolution, we are definitely at the limit, but it's mostly consistent at 50 frames per second, and similar to Burnout Revenge, will probably be pretty smooth at 1.7 times the native resolution. And why not, let's go with one more racing game, and Outrun 2006 is another very demanding game to emulate on the PlayStation 2. I'm using the PAL version again here, and in Vulkan at native resolution, we are staying pretty consistent at that 50 frames per second. This is definitely a good sign since this game is again notoriously hard to emulate, and even through sections I know have issues, it seems to be holding just fine here on the Pocket 4 Pro. I'll go ahead and feature another fantastic game from Criterion. Black is a first-person shooter game from the studio best known for the Burnout series. I have Black here using the NTSC version with Vulkan at 2 times native resolution, and we are staying locked at the 30 frames per second target. I have to say this game looks really solid, cleaned up a bit on the smaller screen here with the Pocket 4 Pro. Finally, let's check out another demanding and difficult to emulate game on the PS2. Shadow of the Colossus probably impressed me the most as I am using the NTSC version at native resolution, and the game does seem to be staying locked to its target frame rate, which is really awesome to see. I did experience some minor dips here and there, but I have to say this is pretty smooth overall. There's no doubt that I'll be doing a lot more playtesting with PlayStation 2, and I definitely would love to see some of your requests in the comments for different games to test. Now let's move over to Gamecube, and things are definitely interesting here. Dolphin has always been tricky because of the multiple forks and how fragmented it can seem to be. Mainline Dolphin from the Play Store has actually come a long way and really should handle a lot of the Gamecube library. But for this video, I'm just going to start out with 2 very difficult games to emulate, and in many ways, the limitation is with the emulator itself. For F-Zero, I settled on using the PAL version here, and for this game, the pre-installed Dolphin for handheld seemed to perform the best with F-Zero GX. Now it's still early testing for me, and for now, I've been testing between Dolphin for handheld and Dolphin from the Play Store. F-Zero is definitely a difficult game to run well, but with more playtime the game does seem to be holding up there. I did turn the resolution scaling down to 0.7x to help stabilize the frame rate. It's not perfect, and I wasn't expecting this one to be. I will be curious to see how the other forks fare with F-Zero and see if we can get this one running just a bit more stable. And for the second game, I have Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2, and this one just has tons of emulation issues in general, and so it's not all that surprising to me that this one is not running perfectly on the Pocket 4 Pro. I am using the PAL version of Rogue Squadron 2 here, and for this game, I found that mainline Dolphin from the Play Store seems to work the best with it, at least in my early testing. I'll let the footage play through a bit more just so you can get a sense of cutscene transitions and a bit more gameplay with this one. Now for Wii, I did test one of my personal favorite games, which is Super Mario Galaxy 2, and this one runs really well using the pre-installed Dolphin for handheld that ships with the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. In fact, I'm really happy with just how well this one performs here, and it looks really great on the RP4 Pro's screen. Now we're not quite done yet with Nintendo, and so let's move quickly to 3DS using the pre-installed Citra, and I am testing Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D, which is definitely the version I prefer over the Wii version, and I've got Donkey Kong running at 4 times the native resolution, and it does seem to be holding up quite well to my testing. I'm definitely looking forward to testing a bit more here with Citra, but like Dolphin, there are multiple forks, and I suspect some games will still require different versions. And again, it's more of a limitation of the emulation and not necessarily the power that we have on hand here. Finally, our last Nintendo platform, and I definitely want to stress that this is very much a bonus for the Pocket 4 Pro, as Switch emulation on Android with Yuzu is still very much in development and is constantly evolving on nearly a daily basis. As time goes on, we will see things become more and more playable, and so this is just fun to see what's possible. I'm almost positive that I will be covering this much more in the future like I did with the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. For all the tests here, I am using the GitHub version of Yuzu for Android with the 16.1.0 firmware. First up, let's take a look at a very popular indie game, and my good friend Mikhailov from Team Retroid seems to believe that he looks like Dave the Diver, and so I think he's going to be really happy to find out that this game seems to be working so far with the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. I needed to turn on docked mode to get this game to launch properly, and so I had to turn down the resolution to 0.75x, and performance is pretty solid here. Another game that I've seen pop up numerous times, and one that I've talked about on the channel before, here we have Sea of Stars, and this one is also doing pretty well so far with my initial playtesting. For this one, I'm at native resolution in handheld mode, and performance does appear to be pretty solid. Now, another indie game that I really love, and a pretty old one at that, is Fez, and this is one that was not full speed for me when I tested it on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. However, on the Pocket 4 Pro, it does seem that we are now locked at that 60 frames per second. Of course, we can't talk about Switch without a few Mario games, and I wanted to try out Super Mario RPG briefly, and I was surprised that this one was holding up on the 4 Pro. This is another game that needed docked mode to run properly, and so I had to turn the resolution down to 0.5x because of that. We are not quite full speed, but for the most part, I'd say this is acceptable performance to me, and the lower resolution scaling isn't as noticeable because of the screen size here on the 4 Pro. And one last Mario game, Super Mario Wonder I thought would be a good test, and this one is so very close to being full speed on the 4 Pro. For this one, I am set to handheld mode, but I did turn the resolution scaling down to 0.5x to get as much performance out of this one. We are really close here, and this one just hovers slightly below 60 frames per second, and I do think it's pretty playable, but I'm hoping that we will see this one improved with future updates of Yuzu. There's going to be a lot more to come here with emulation in general, and I'm sure as I do more testing, I'm going to discover all sorts of new things. Now, many longtime viewers know just how much I love native Android gaming, especially on devices like the 4 Pro, and so this is a section that will be getting plenty more attention in the future. However, I still wanted to test at least one native Android game here, and so I decided to load up Diablo Immortal, which does have full gamepad support and so makes good use of the 4 Pro here. Better yet, this game is set to high settings with the 60 frames per second mode, and things look really solid here with plenty of headroom to change settings as you desire for better battery life. And because we have those new triggers, I could not resist loading up something from Xbox Game Pass Cloud, and with the Wi-Fi 6 on board here, I think many are going to enjoy using the 4 Pro as an affordable game streaming device. I've got Doom Eternal on screen here, and this was an absolute joy to play on the 4 Pro thanks to those improved controls and Wi-Fi 6. I'm actually really impressed here, and I'm definitely going to be testing PC streaming as well in the future. So before we wrap things up here, I do want to talk about the green tint that Stubbs discovered on our live stream the other night. I went ahead and grabbed my Pocket 3 Plus to compare against the 4 Pro here, and you can definitely see the difference when I have a white background on screen. I did manually adjust the exposure here to best capture it, but I do think it's coming off on camera pretty well. Now, I've been told that this is going to be addressed in an over-the-air update, and that Retroid is aware of the issue. I will definitely be checking this again when that OTA comes in from Retroid, and I just wanted to put this notice out there since I do think it's useful information. Okay, so maybe this wasn't as quick of a look as I was planning, but really there's a lot to talk about here, and plenty more to come once I return from my trip to CES. My usual full in-depth review with in-depth benchmarks, a teardown, and a lot more emulation will be coming. Please put any requests in the comments and I will try my best to get to them. As always, I am the Retro Tech Dad, and thank you so much for watching.